What is up, ladies and gentlemen? It's Skill up here. Today, I want to put out my impressions of Mass Effect Andromeda, and I want to do them in the context of the very controversial preview that was put out by Rock Paper Shotgun. So the background to this, for anyone that doesn't know, is that Rock Paper Shotgun is a website, a fairly respected gaming website, and they've put out a very scathing critique of the first sort of 10 hours of play of Mass Effect, describing it, I think this is probably some of the best summary of it here, and I'll just quote it. The first few hours of Andromeda are a gruesome trudge through the most trite bilge of the previous 3 games, smeared out in a setting that's horribly familiar, burdened with some outstandingly awful writing, buried beneath a UI that appears to have been designed to infuriate in every possible way. Now, that is obviously it's a very strong, there's fighting words, so to speak, on the internet, and I just want to stress that I'm not here to start beef with Rock Paper Shotgun or create drama. I have played about 20 hours of this game, and I hold a very different perspective than what the journalist here has put forward, and I want to share that view, just in response to the view that he's put forward, because I think he raises some interesting points, and I agree with some of them, but I think some of them are really off the mark as well, and I think it's probably a little bit more interesting to hear different perspectives when you're hearing a preview of a game rather than just hearing my viewpoint alone. So let's get into the action. I actually put this up on Reddit today, and it's currently, at the time of recording, the top post on the Mass Effect Reddit, and I kind of broke down what I thought about each of the things that the author said. So just breaking down that summary statement that I offered before, he said the first few hours of Andromeda are a gruesome trudge through the most trite bilge of the previous 3 games. Now, I'm unsure what he's referring to when he mentions trite bilge of the previous 3 games, as this is a fairly vague statement. If he's referring to some of the generic side quests or character backstories, then sure, there's absolutely going to be some of those. If he's referring to revisiting some of the older world-building stories, like the Genophage, or, Solarian scientific prowess, or the Krogan clan structure, then yes, you're absolutely going to get some of that too, because it's kind of necessary to orient new players to the legacy elements of this world, and perhaps to remind returning players as well. So if it feels like you're kind of doing a bit of backtracking over old original trilogy story when you get started, that's absolutely true. Now, on the topic of the quality of writing, which is something that this Rock Paper Shotgun guy, John Walker is his name, is very critical of, I really didn't find the writing that bad at all, and I'm actually someone that really appreciates good writing and storytelling in video games. Now, to be fair, BioWare hasn't always been strong in moment-to-moment writing, but they've always excelled in world building, and that is building this environment, these stories, these backstories that kind of create this fantasy for us. The character dialogue that I've seen as a part of all of this ranges from being quite passable to being actually quite good, and the side mission stories and dialogue, they're definitely on the generic side of the spectrum so far. That's kind of going to be the case in any game though. Even The Witcher 3, which I think had some of the best side quest sort of dialogue or narrative of any game ever, still had certain side quests that felt quite generic. I do think though that solid world building foundations have been set that provide a good canvas for future storytelling. It perhaps isn't as ambitious as it could have been given the fact that there's a lot of original trilogy baggage, but that's the direction that BioWare chose to take. They could have gone completely fresh start, new species, new everything, but they chose to keep it quite familiar, and I guess we just kind of have to accept that decision. Now, on the topic of voice acting, which again John Walker very critical of, saying it's really quite terrible, I think that these complaints are really overblown. I think the voice acting has actually been quite good. There's one character that cops a lot of flack. His name is Liam. He's your sort of soldier dude. His character is actually really well voice acted, I found, because he kind of has this cheeky, laconic charm about him and a very simple way of speaking that sounds quite different to the rest of the cast, who are all really sort of smooth talking voice actor types, whereas this guy just feels really different and kind of really authentic in a way.
I said a lot of people have their hopes pinned on us. They gave up on Eos. Can't blame them. Expected a golden world, instead they saw their friends die. Never know how that'll affect
Now, honestly, there hasn't been a single line of dialogue that I've encountered that feels out of place or amateur, or anywhere near the lows of like a Japanese RPG or, Zelda Breath of the Wild. So I really think the voice acting is actually quite good. Now, on the topic of companion characterization, I would say that it probably feels a little bit weaker than the original trilogy. The way that we meet these characters and the first impressions that they create aren't quite as striking as the first time around, but it's impossible to say whether or not that's because of the characters or the writing, or if it's just the pure nostalgia factor, and you remember meeting Rex the very first time in the Citadel and being like, holy shit, this is awesome, versus now you meet another Krogan and it's like, well, that doesn't feel quite as impressive because this person isn't Rex. So, it feels fine though. Like, it doesn't feel like these characters are shitty or boring, or that you're not going to grow attached to them over the span of, however many games BioWare chooses to go with this. But yeah, it doesn't immediately snap to in the way that perhaps the original trilogy did. So that's something that I think everyone's going to have their own individual perspective on. Now, combat, I personally believe, is just fantastic. John Walker has said it was kind of fine in inverted commas, and I don't think it's fine. I actually think it's really good. I think it's some of the best third-person combat I've played, and obviously I played Gears of War. I played The Division as my main game, which has millions and millions of flaws, don't get me wrong, but the combat is actually quite good. Like the process of pulling the trigger, of taking cover, the kinetic or kinesthetic connection to your weapon, these are all really, really strong things, and I really feel like Mass Effect delivers on that front as well. So I think calling combat fine is really, really undercooking it personally. On the UI side, that is the user interface, there are some very legitimate complaints that John Walker makes. Loading screens between parts of the Nexus are kind of really sucky. They have these trams set up to hide the loading screens, where before the original trilogy had elevators. And the whole planet scanning thing is back, where you kind of fly to a planet, you're in orbit, you kind of got a scanner that you sort of use to go up and down the planet to identify resources, to collect them. It's back, and to be honest, it sucks just as much as it always did, only now it's worse because there are these really long loading screens associated with doing that. So that really should have been left behind. Now, when it comes to things like menus, yeah, you'll spend a fair amount of time in your menus when it comes to skills and crafting and the like, and John Walker didn't like those. I don't particularly like them either. They don't feel great, but I don't really care about that, to be honest with you. I mean, The Witcher 3 had some of the worst menus in video games, so did Skyrim, but are those games any weaker for it? I personally don't think so. I don't think that Mass Effect Andromeda is any weaker for it either. And when it comes to the open world elements, there are plenty of, fetch these items, scan these items kind of quests, which are quite generic, absolutely, but you don't have to do them if you don't want to. It's really quite optional. I do think, though, that you are going to spend a lot of time scanning the environment while you're doing missions, and I feel like that's just a bit too over the top. You spend so much time walking around with your scanner out that it really isn't, it just feels a bit over the top. And in particular, if you've ever played The Witcher and you know what it's like to be using your Witcher senses to look for clues and follow trails of scent or blood or whatever, you get over that mechanic pretty fast, and I think the same sort of thing happens here with your scanner. Now, the thing that John Walker doesn't talk about, but that I will talk about, is the new dialogue system. Now, before, I must admit a full bias here. I am a huge Renegade Shepard fan. I suspect many of you probably never played Renegade Shepard, because I'm always the guy that plays the good guy in video games, right? But for whatever reason, I thought, you know what, I'm going to try this Renegade thing. And oh my god, Renegade Shepard produces some of the best moments in the history of video games. Like the history of video game dialogue. It's just incredible, some of the stuff that Shepard busts out with. It's truly amazing. So that Paragon Renegade system allowed you to define an identity for your Shepard along a kind of good or bad axis, right? That was how that worked. But now there are actually 4 different, but in my view, totally indistinguishable axes. And I can't even remember what they're called now. They're like logical, emotional, something and something. They're really forgettable. And I honestly feel like most of the dialogue options that I have in front of me when I have to choose between these 4 options, they all feel like variants of the same sentiment. And there's no opportunity whatsoever, or very little opportunity, to be the bad guy or the bad girl. There's no renegade. It feels like you're always Paragon. It's just, you know, do you want to be logical Paragon? Do you want to be emotional Paragon? And to me, that difference is so minute that it really just feels like you're not having much impact on that decision making or that dialogue at all. You know, where that Paragon and Renegade system in the past produced these unforgettable moments, there literally has not been one dialogue moment so far that I've heard that's like really sort of gone, that's made me go, holy shit, that was amazing. You know what I mean? Like, not a single one. And obviously I'm only 20 hours in, who knows, more stuff might emerge, but for me, this is the biggest shortcoming in the game so far. Now, many people are going to disagree with me on this, because I read a Kotaku article as well by Patricia Hernandez, who thinks it's way better. You know, they think they love the nuance that it brings, because it feels more realistic and you kind of have to think about it more. But for me personally, I'm not seeing... I can't predict what my character will actually say when I select one of those options, because the text is different to the voice. I can't really see the difference between those 4 options very often because they're so similar, and I certainly can't detect a difference in the outcome that those options produce, whereas none of those 3 things that I've just listed were true in the Paragon Renegade system. So, very interested to see how people receive this when that finally gets into their hands, because for me, it's the biggest change, but, you know, obviously everyone's going to have their own perspective. So, what the Rock, Paper, Shotgun article does not talk about is that the fact that the RPG systems within this game are really, really excellent. The skill system is fantastic, huge amounts of variety, you know, in terms of your skill trees. The abilities are fantastic. The way you can switch between them on the fly is awesome. That all is just top notch, and I really feel like not calling that out in any preview of this game is, you know, it's just missing something very, very important. It also doesn't really talk about the visuals, which I can tell you are at times absolutely stunning. I mean, there are moments where my jaw is on the floor just by how beautiful this game looks, and also how well they've designed things like the Nomad or the Tempest or the Nexus or whatever. You know, so much of it is just is really beautiful. It's just a beautiful game when it wants to be, you know. But I think more than anything else, this you know, John Walker Rock, Paper, Shotgun preview really just sort of makes it sound like a shitty game, and it's not a shitty game, to be honest with you. I hope I'm not unfairly sort of paraphrasing John there, because I know he was saying that things might change in the future, but certainly he said it's a shitty first 10 hours. That much is clear. And I can tell you from my personal perspective, it's not. It's actually really good from what I've seen. It doesn't achieve the highs that I think the original trilogy achieves, but I can't say that yet, because I really feel like so many of our memories of the original trilogy are like rose-tinted glasses, because we can stand back and look at those incredible memories, and we can kind of forget all of the shitty things and just focus on how incredible that experience was in aggregate. And so now we look back and say, oh my god, that was amazing. You know, maybe at the end of this game, 18 months down the track, we'll look back and say, actually, that first experience, that first landing on that first planet, that first vault I explored, the first time I met that companion, that was awesome, because I'm going to be able to go through the whole journey. I'm going to be able to contextualize it with time, and you know, that's that. But certainly, I really feel like nothing I've seen so far is cause to think that this is not a good game, and potentially even a great game, if BioWare can sort of carry through the remaining, you know, 20, 30, 40 hours, however long it is. So it gets an absolute thumbs up from me in terms of the preliminary view. These are my impressions based on 20 hours of play. I'm obviously going to be doing a more complete review later on, where I'll talk about it end to end. But for now, guys, I just want to say that I think it's a good game, and I really welcome Rock, Paper, Shotgun perspective on it. Again, no beef, no disrespect. Really like it when people put out different perspectives on stuff, but I just wanted to put out mine and say I didn't agree. So let me know, guys, what you think in the comments below in terms of what you've seen and what your impressions of it are. I know you wouldn't have played it yet, but you know, are you hyped about the what you're seeing? Are you hyped about the footage? Obviously, the early access goes live tomorrow, so if you see this video after that time, please let me know what you think when you do get your hands on it. Obviously, please as well, if you like the video, guys, do drop it a like, and I'm going to be doing plenty of Mass Effect videos in the next little while, so be sure to subscribe. Really very keen to get stuck into the multiplayer in particular, because yeah, that is pretty great from what I've seen so far. I'm scheduled for a multiplayer test in the next little while, so I can't wait to share details with you on that. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.